Hello, hello. We're going to get started. If everybody wants to come on in. They took my podium. That's my security blanket. That's how Austin does things. Welcome, everyone. We are live streaming this event, so the camera's right up there. Don't do any lewd gestures or anything at the members that couldn't make it to the warm weather, especially those that are in the Midwest or East. So I want to welcome you all to Austin and to the Capitol Factory. I hope you guys were able to do the tour and see that NAMC has actually opened an office here on the 8th floor with Army Applications Lab. If not, you can make your way up to the 8th floor and see that after the event or during the networking break. We're really trying to continue to foster our relationship with Army Futures Command and Army Applications Lab and showcase the good work that our members are doing, which is the reason for the office. And the thought behind it is to have a place for all of you as our members to work out of when you are here in Austin. So we'll be rolling out a SOP document in the next couple of weeks to show you just how you can reserve that space and have a place to work out of while we continue to highlight the good work that you guys are doing down here in Army Futures Command backyard. I want to, where did Sean go? Oh, you're right there. So I want to introduce Sean Duffy, who is the VP of Partnerships for Capitol Factory, so he can kind of give you guys the Austin welcome and talk a little bit about what Capitol Factory does.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody. The Austin welcome actually is beer and barbecue, so Alyssa, great job making that happen. But yeah, I'm Sean Duffy, VP of Partnerships for Capitol Factory. We're really excited to have all of you here, excited to have NAMC as a part of the community. And just by way of a quick overview, I know most of you guys got the tour, which is awesome. I encourage you to check out Capitol Factory, talk to our members, all of our corporate partners who are here. I know that they're excited to have NAMC here. There are a few things that are coming up, and if you ever want to check in on what's happening at Capitol Factory, capitalfactory.com/events. We'd love to see you at an event. We had about 200,000 people attend events last year. We do them all the time. If you didn't hear this stat on the tour, it's about 1,500 events throughout the year. Most of those are not events that we put on as Capitol Factory, but that our members and member organizations put on. And so one of those that's coming up, I don't know how many of you all are planning on going to South by Southwest, but we have a ton of really great programs that are happening throughout our space. And then on the other end of the year, Austin Startup Week is one of the biggest events of the year for the city of Austin. And it's just a week of finding out about the latest and greatest in technology across so many different domains. I can't even repeat all of them. So encourage you to get involved in the community and stick around for a while. And as you guys are members of NAMC, Alyssa and Macon have been amazing. They will help you get plugged in and make sure that you are coming to all of our cool things. So thanks for being here for this, and I'll turn it back over to Alyssa.
Thanks, Sean. And I introduced Sean right away, and I didn't introduce myself, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm Alyssa Roth. I'm Director of Operations for NAMC. I'm based in Ann Arbor. But as Sean said, we do have a consultant that is based here, Macon Field, who is standing in the back. Wave, Macon. She has an office here in Austin. And there's a couple other people I want to introduce. We have John St. John, who is newest to our staff. I think you guys all maybe know him from his previous role as PMRCV, but we scooped him up right after retirement, and he oversees our project portfolio now. I also have, and I don't know where anybody else. Okay, so I have Dan Pearson, if you want to wave. He is our manned vehicle consultant for NAMC, retired deputy PEO for land systems, so another great grab of ours, and so talk to him. And then we have a few board members here. I don't know where you are, so everybody's going to have to wave. But we have our president of the board of directors, Kevin Mulrennan. Where's he at? We have our vice president, Matt Dooley, right in front. We have Dan DeGear, who is going to be on a panel in just a minute. And then we also have Dave Miller from BAE in the back. So welcome. I also want to let you know that we are going to be growing our staff even further and hiring an operations assistant in the next couple months. I would want this person to be based in Ann Arbor with me, but if you know of anyone who has some social media skills, it'd be a little bit more than entry level, but somebody to get into the defense business, please do an e-introduction with me and let me know. We're looking for, some young energy to help us with our social media. So at our last general membership meeting, we kind of promised you guys a few things. One of those things was diversified locations for our meetings coupled with other industry events. And so here we are in Austin in the backyard for Army Futures Command and also co-located with tactical wheeled vehicles. We also wanted to start assisting with teaming opportunities and spotlighting our members. We are at 425 members, so there's a lot of you, but we love to sing your praises. So we've started a member spotlight. Can I see a show of hands if you guys have looked at those the last couple months that we've sent out? Oh, good. So for those, we highlight a POC information, capabilities, and then we have some interview questions that we provide to you. If you want to be highlighted, there's an application on the NAMC member site. We're doing those monthly, one in each of the capability objective areas of our OTA. So take a look at that and submit your applications. We're just kind of banking a pool to pull from every month and send it out around the end of the month. We also started quarterly webinars to keep you guys informed and to have additional touch points with you. Our first quarterly webinar was on government funding, which feedback indicated was highly useful. The next one we were tracking was going to be on CMMC, but there's not as much information out there as we'd like, so we're gonna get that a little bit later as we get more information for you guys. But we want you to know that we are tracking closely. What we know right now is version 1 was released, and Ms. Lord did do a press conference that you can find on the CMMC AB website, which is a nonprofit that was stood up to help implement and I think accredit the people that are going to be certifying that you guys are CMMC certified. So I would check that out. They are taking a more methodical, slower, conservative approach to implementing from what we've heard. Only about 10 programs this fiscal year will have CMMC applied, and the most important thing is no current programs will have it applied. But it's really important that you guys start early and take a look at what those requirements are going to be and start working towards them, because certification will be mandatory when you get an award, and we don't want you to miss out on any of that. On the OTA side, we don't have a lot of information. What we are getting from GVSC and ACC Warren, we are passing down to you through emails. And as we get more guidance of how they're going to be implementing that on our OTA, we'll make sure we get that to you. But the big takeaway right now is start early. You can download the version 1. They even have an appendix of it in an Excel format, which is what we'll do for NAMC. We were NIST certified, so we'll make sure we're checking the boxes where we were, but looking at what is going to be further required of us. And we'll track closely to see how we can assist you as our members, especially the small businesses and non-traditionals, in getting that certification so you don't miss out on anything. We also welcome any feedback and how you think NAMC could play a role in supporting you in all of that. Okay, and then I want you all to save the date. There is a AUSA AFC conference that is scheduled to be down here in Austin, June 23rd through the 25th. In association with that, they're going to have what they're calling an innovation combine. So based on the success of the Flash to Bang program that NAMC did with GVSC last summer, GVSC has actually been tapped to do an big Army Flash to Bang type pitch day event. And so that will be with that conference. there will be potentially up to $1 million in awards. And it looks like it's going to be potentially 3 rounds of competition. So down select from white paper, request for proposals to 8 to 10, and then those finalists will pitch during that event to the AUSA audience as well as SMEs from the Army. And same day selection announcements will be made. So we're really excited about that, and that's going to come through the GVS OTA as well. We have a great short program for you guys. I hope you got some barbecue and beer. When we were setting up the invitation, one of our staffers said, you might not want to say cold one. They're going to think you're serving beer. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. It's Austin. So I trust you are all drinking responsibly but enjoying yourself. Next up, we're going to have something I'm really excited about, an industry panel for the teams that were awarded the RCV light and medium projects, or I'm sorry, selected. The awards haven't quite been made yet, but are working through that process. But really from an industry perspective, to get their take on how that acquisition timeline worked for them and the touch points that were part of that. And it'll be our first time really kind of showcasing, panel members in that way that are our members. After that, we're going to hear from Army Applications Labs. We have a few people from here. They're our new neighbors on the 8th floor. And they really bring the innovation to the Army in dual-use technologies and things like that. So we have 3 of their program staff here. And I think you guys have probably been networking with them a little bit during this as well. And then after that, we have General Kaufman and Mr. Langout, who will be joining us for a chat about their priorities and some of the things that they're working on. Did I forget anything? That's our whole agenda, right? Okay. All right, so I am going to hand it over to John St. John, who is going to moderate the next panel. But thank you again, and welcome.
So have the other members come on up that are going to be part of this. So as Alyssa said, this is kind of a group that are getting ready to be awarded contracts for RCV Light and RCV Medium. So we have Dan DeGuire, VP for Land Systems for Kinetic North America. We have Chris Houghton, VP for Engineering Solutions for PME. We have Sean Beatty, Tech Director, Applied Tech and Advanced Programs for Textron Systems, and David Vines, BD for FLIR Unmanned Ground Systems. So what I'd like to do first is just kind of go through a little bit for those that may not know exactly what's been going on in this arena over about the last 18 months. I'm going to kind of give a brief history of what's been going on. So we'll go all the way back to July of 18. And there was an RFI that was put out through NAMC that was looking for next generation RCV technologies. There was about 59 responses for that RFI. And from that RFI, there were down selected to about 12 members that then came in and worked, and there was a soldier innovation workshop that happened in August of 18. And so that brought soldiers and industry together to come up with concepts. And then from there, in October of 18, that was really when the new NGCV CFT came on board and was then located in Michigan at Warren. And they started their campaign of learning, and they had their first industry day at the end of October. And so that really gave, and there was, I think a lot of you guys were there at that one. I think we had a pretty good crowd of around 100 to 130 industry partners that showed up for that. A lot of questions were asked. Major Corey Wallace, who's the lead for RCV, was very candid and open with industry on what that CFT was trying to do in this arena. So from there, in February of 19, there was a response that went out for looking for the maturity of robotic systems and autonomy. And from there, then there was an application process that came through NAMC, and NAMC then, in partnership with the government, did a demonstration assessment down at Texas A&M University out at the Rellis. From there, from what happened at the market research, then there were a release of white papers that happened for both light and medium. And I think there was around 13 or so light respondents and around 8 medium respondents. The thing that we saw when we were out at the market research is there wasn't a medium vehicle that really came there. And so we were surprised. I think everybody was a little surprised of how many medium responses that we did have for the request for white papers. And then one of the things that happened after that was then those respondents came in and did orals with a panel, government panel. And then after that, there was a down select to, I think, around 4 for each for then a full request for proposal. And then from there, we now have what the 2 winners are. And so that's kind of where we've gone through the last 18 months. I think it's been fast and furious for those that have been working in this space. And so what I'd like to do right now, guys, is just open it up for each of the teams and just kind of look, overview of the team and the contributions that each teammate has provided to the overall solution. So I'll kind of start down at the end with Q&A and Pratt and Miller.
So for Kinetic North America, it was really our team is basically partnered with Pratt and Miller and really taking the strengths of both companies and all the technology we had collected through the years with very mature, proven systems and putting them together to really meet and provide a solution at very low risk for the program. And that was really the key thing. Our background in robotics and field systems and command and control and fire control safety, and then Pratt and Miller's incredible experience with automotive, really, for us, it formed a team that we thought was extremely credible and low risk, and that was the key thing, is coming together and providing a solution that we felt could meet the objective and meet the schedule and result in a good product in the end. So I'm going to let Chris say a few words so he can add, because he's an important part of our team.
Thanks, Dan. I think, one of the other things that we had from Pratt & Miller's side was 2 years of experimentation with McWill with the platform. So really, the Pratt & Miller team has brought the platform, and the Kinetic team has a lot of experience, as Dan said, with fielded programs of record for the Army, and together, we feel like that really is, a great starting point for this experimentation, phase of the program that's coming up.
Glad to be here. Team Ripsaw, composed of Textron Systems, FLIR Systems, and How Technologies, really together have over 30 years of robotic combat experience and 20 years of putting robotic systems in soldiers' hands every day. So kind of across the board, we have that mission and that focus in our DNA. And FLIR Systems provides advanced sensing, embedded processing. How provides the innovation around a mobility platform that's built to shape as the mission evolves over the next 24 months and the time after that as we move this capability into the field. To me, I think I'm really excited by the opportunity here with what Team Ripsaw provides, with really reshaping the dynamics of the future battlefield, shaping that geometry in our advantage, and doing it quickly at a low risk. So I'll turn it over to Dave.
Yeah, nothing really to add. I mean, I think FLIR's happy to be part of this team with as part of Team Ripsaw and with Textron and How Technologies. I think our combined DNA between Textron's unmanned systems integration experience, how-in-house experience with mobility platforms. You can watch Fast and Furious, any number of movies to see what they provide. And then FLIR's experience is the world's sixth sense, right? We like to say we don't make the ripsaw, we just make the ripsaw smarter. So that AI-enabled surveillance technology we bring to the table, the unmanned systems experience, I think, makes for a pretty powerful team on our side. And we're just happy to be part of this. And I want to thank General Kaufman and NAMC for the opportunity to provide the technology for this RCV Phase 2B experiment in the next year.
So, you know, the one thing that I think the RCV program was at least trying to do was trying to make sure, at least from the NAMC perspective, as we were going through this, that we were making sure there was teaming aspects to these. So, when it comes to industry and sharing information, what are your biggest concerns, and how does the NAMC help mitigate some of that risk?
I think when you start looking at competitive environments, you know, there's always this apprehension about sharing information. But one thing that we found that NAMC in particular helped us was that arbiter between the government and industry to really reflect the needs and the opportunities and the challenges ahead of us for RCV. So having that trusted agent to really interpret and advocate for industry and advocate for the government customer as well, I think was very important. That spans intellectual property to speed of acquisition, objectives, and budgeting. All of that kind of wraps up into how NAMC's helped us get an understanding of this field and this opportunity.
I would concur. I think that the NAMC has actually looked out for its partner members, and even when they're not sure, you know, everything's very clearly labeled, everything's clearly marked, and even when you know, something may come up or maybe arise that are you sure you intended this? You know, I think the NAMC is a good broker. Well, they'll come back and say, did you really intend this? So it's a pleasure to work with them, and I think it should be for all the board members, all the membership who do programs. So.
Just want to add, so we've been, so FLIR Unmanned Ground Systems was Endeavor Robotics, and before that we were iRobot Defense and Security. So we've been working with NAMC for, well, I've been working personally with NAMC for about 7 years, but we've been working with NAMC for a lot longer. And it may not have been obvious, you know, 10 years ago what a trusted agent NAMC was. And I think RCV kind of put an exclamation point on it because of the collaboration that we had to do with NAMC, with the consortium over the last year and a half. And really, if you look at the demonstration event back in May, NAMC not only did a great job with that, but I really felt like, and I think I can probably speak for both of our companies, that when we spoke with NAMC and shared our solution, we felt confident that our competitive intel, that competitive intel wasn't going to get out. Like, it wasn't, you know, our competition wasn't going to find out what we were proposing. The discussions we were having with the government in front of NAMC weren't going to be disclosed. Yeah, I think NAMC has done a great job protecting that proprietary information and being a good arbiter, as Sean said, between us and the government as kind of a middleman.
So kind of staying on the teaming aspect, as you're looking for partners to team with, can you kind of elaborate on the process in which you brought together from the end-to-end warded solution? Like, what do you look at when you're going after something like RCV and you're looking for members to team with? What are, I know without not giving away your secret sauce, but kind of some of the high-level things you look for.
Yeah, I don't think that you know, when it comes to finding good partners and finding good, you know, team members, that doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It doesn't happen at a meeting. It really takes time to develop that, you know, the communications and the trust that you have a common DNA, you have common goals among the team, and it takes time. So I think that especially with the rodeo this past summer. It was a good way to see people operating in, very hot, tough environments, and it was a great environment to see how people behaved. Not everything went well, and who's rolling up their sleeves and working and executing to make things go correctly. It was important, and then the other part of that is being honest about what you're providing, because at the end of the day, we're providing something that's very important to our customer and to our soldiers, and we have to get it right. It's our job. So, I think that was part of looking at and building the team. And Chris, you want to add any?
Sure. I think, like Dan said, just keep going on that point. I think we, from Pratt Miller side, we were looking at what experience is required to actually help the Army and help the warfighter, and how can we bolster our team and our chances and find a partner that has experience in the areas that we don't. We knew that with the EMAV platform that we had a mature platform that had been through a lot of experimentation already with Marines side by side, but not used as much with the Army. So that was a key aspect for us when we were thinking about teaming, was who's got experience getting a program of record to the Army. And Kinetic was a great fit for that.
Yeah, I think one area that really helped us was really getting that vision from the CFT early. And even though it was still perhaps forming, it really gave us a roadmap to really look ahead at the end state need, so that we could work with partners to make sure that we were meeting not only the near-term objective of schedule and cost and technical performance on Phase 2B, but getting the right solution in the field in the long run. And so that communication facilitated by NAMC was essential to us really figuring out how we go tackle this problem, because short view is certainly necessary to get through the next few months, just to realize success and even uncover the next level of challenges that we have as industry and government to go tackle these robotic combat vehicles within formation. But longer term, where it's headed, those tech initiatives, those tech challenges were really informative for us to really find the right mix.
Okay. So what is one thing that you guys might have liked to have known before you started this, before you were going down this? What was one piece of information or something that if you would have had that, maybe things would have been a little bit different? Anything?
I think the budget would have helped a little bit from my personal perspective. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, right? Particularly as you start looking at the challenges ahead. But that was one area that wish I had known. But honestly, that was a minor factor. I would say the not worrying about communication. So I won't worry about communication with what NAMC was able to provide, right? There's concern about ambiguity of the requirements and the acquisition process. But as we went through that, as was brought up earlier, if there was a clarification needed, it was handled in a very expedient and helpful fashion, so that we could really go back to our leadership and make the business cases that we needed to make.
I would say there's probably nothing currently. I mean, I think it's really looking forward and looking at the program. We see a lot of administrations come and go, and we see a lot of programs, really good programs, don't make it. And, we're very, we expect, is this program going to make it through all the way to a fielded system? We have to demonstrate, and technology could be perfect. We've seen good programs not make it through, and we've seen, so it's a big question. For us as industry, we invest a lot of time and money and a lot of excitement around these programs, and we want to see these things successful, and we just don't know that will there be other influences or forces outside of what we're doing, outside our domain, that could impact the future of it.
So on the other end, was there anything that you guys did that maybe you think back on now that you wouldn't have done? Anything?
Eat less barbecue? I don't know. I think we had it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and
Okay. So what solutions did you bring to the May 19 RCV demo event? And how did that event help inform what ended up being your final RCV solution?
For the rodeo, we brought out 3 robotic platforms, actually. We used TMT-I, which was a small infantry version of the trackless moving target, and we had TMT-V. Both of those were wheeled platforms, all electric, that have been used for training with PEO STRI. And then we brought the EMAV platform also, which was a tracked diesel electric hybrid platform. So we brought those 3 out to the rodeo, and I think all the teams learned a lot about some issues that are actually going to help accelerate the whole program overall as far as communications go. I think that was a common challenge for all the teams. I think there's some activities that learning drove to help the program accelerate and be ready for that in the future. But I also think that, just based on this set of terrain that we are in with being in the mud, and we really saw the difference between some of the wheeled and tracked platforms for mobility in that super soft soil. That's not necessarily representative of exactly all mobility requirements, but it certainly showed the challenges of that particular mobility condition in the soft, muddy soil that was out there at the rodeo. We also had a chance to experiment with the fully weighed versions and really working on doing some obstacles and events at full GVW, which was a great experience, and in addition to the the tele-op experience and the rest of the demonstrations that we got to do during the rodeo event.
Yeah, for kinetic, basically we brought out a surrogate systems that we could use to demonstrate our capability from a command and control perspective, from a remote weapon station control perspective, from an operator control perspective. So for us, they weren't the end be all, but they were technology demonstrators of capability. And I think that the venue, from a flexibility perspective, allowed us a lot of capability and a lot of timing to actually go out and show, test, and evaluate what we had, and I think that was really important. The environment wasn't always the best, but I think it really helped prove out the platforms that were there, and we could see the capability and limitations pretty quickly, given the environment. So, yeah, that's what we had brought.
Yeah, from Team Ripsaw, we actually showed up as a team at the event in May with a couple platforms, one an old, I think 11-year-old M3 Ripsaw platform that was from a prior effort that we'd upgraded with a few sensing and perception technologies, as well as our small multi-purpose equipment transport platform that we enhanced with situational awareness as well. And I think it was really a good gut check to be out there for both industry and on the government side to really assess where the state of the art was and validate the challenges and the opportunities for moving forward with the next phase of the program. And I would say that I've been on a number of demos in very far-flung areas, and I would say the opportunity to work at that location and with the team there on site, it was very well executed, and I think did a fair job at assessing where industry was and informing next steps across the board.
Yeah, so on the FLIR side, as part of Team Ripsaw, as Sean said, we had already formed our team. We had done a very rapid integration of some FLIR sensing technology onto the 9-year-old 3rd-gen Ripsaw, which was existing commercial technology and some that was a little immature. So we integrated a 360 SA solution, an untethered R80 Skyraider, and then one of our gimbals, which is a commercial platform. And I think having the opportunity to experiment and actually use that system, that Ripsaw, with all those things on it in an operational environment, or a representative operational environment. It was kind of a hard environment with the mud in the heat, in the rain, and some of the terrain challenges. I think that allowed us to sharpen our pencil for what we need to do for the next gen, for the proposal for Phase 2B. So I think it was a great opportunity to really identify some of the challenges we had and make sure that what we provide in Phase 2B is going to be something that General Kaufman can use to inform the future of robotic combat vehicle.
So from my perspective, where I was sitting at the time, you know, I was kind of on the outside looking into this process. But what I saw was a kind of a methodical process that the government and NAMC was doing as they were going through this. So what is your assessment of that process that NAMC and the government applied here for the RCV program, from the RFIs to the demo to the request for white papers to the pitch panels and then eventually to the RPP invites and awards? So if you can discuss that.
I think that, you know, it was necessary and very beneficial to really have those touch points with the customer and industry to really frame up the art of the possible in a very schedule-driven, need-based, incremental step forward in pushing RCVs out and showing what they are capable of. So I found it to be very supportive from the standpoint of how do you address an industry side these emerging science and technology needs, complex problems at a system level, and then articulate that back into our business to get the endorsement to move forward, right? So, you know, building the business case for an emerging program is often difficult. And I think, you know, having those touch points and be able to have that conversation through these very pragmatic and somewhat formalized means really helps us do that.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is, you know, between the process was the speed of feedback. I mean, that's something we usually don't get, but that interactive communication, speed of feedback, I think was key to helping us stay in the right direction and keep our resources focused, and that was something that was very nice and very helpful for the team. So
I think the only other thing I'd add to that is just relative to teaming that you hit on earlier. I think that, you know, the ability to have the event, you know, for Kinetic and Pratt & Miller, that was really, we certainly knew each other before that, but that really was the start of getting more serious about how could we work together, and what might that look like. And then so as the process, you know, that really forced us, because of the tight timeline and the clear schedule for orals and then, you know, down selection and proposal, that really accelerated our teaming also based on that schedule.
Yeah, I guess I'll add. So just about the panel pitch, you kind of cued me there. The panel pitches I thought were a great opportunity for the government and for us, right? Because it's one thing to write a proposal, it's another one to go stand in front of 25 experts in their fields and substantiate what you wrote. So I think on the government side, that was probably useful for you to validate and understand who you need to invite for the RPP, but also for us, understand, oh, maybe we got a weakness there, right? Like we went in there and they were asking us these questions, like we didn't necessarily have a good answer about this one particular thing when you go back and relook at that. So I thought the panel pitches were particularly useful. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about Major Wallace being very candid as part of the whole process here. And not just Major Wallace, but everybody, is when you're a business development person or you own a business, you got to go to your leadership and ask for IRAD to invest, to do something, to pursue something or whatever. And there's always more questions, more RFIs about what the opportunity is. You have to provide that business case, and having that open discussion really helps us make that business case for investment, which at the end of the day helps the Army or the Department of Defense. I just applaud everybody on the government side for always answering emails and always answering phone calls. Because there's oftentimes in defense contracting, I know a lot of my industry friends here will tell you, there's this, I got a secret thing, and you're trying to like do Google searches and ask your buddies what's going on. And this was like the opposite of that.
Good. So we're moving in, so we're about ready to obviously get this next phase started off. I think we're down to, dotting the Ts and things. What do you see as some of the challenges, some of the program challenges going forward from where we're at right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple facets. One was raised about the demonstration, communications, and the interconnected assets on the battlefield. Comms are going to remain a technical challenge across the board, and we'll be wrestling through that as we evolve the technology through the demonstration and expand it as part of a combined man-unmanned team in collaboration with the light platform and phase one assets. So that's a technical challenge, but I think overarching there's a cultural challenge that I think you alluded to earlier around achieving trust in these systems to go perform a mission. So the cultural issue of, I'm using this system to extend my reach in standoff, to deliver an effect in perhaps concert with multiple systems on board and adjacent to that platform with a level of training that doesn't drive an exquisite extended training course that cannot be sustained in the long run. I mean, those are technical challenges that will lead ultimately to a cultural issue of how do you get a robotic combat vehicle into the formation to really deliver that effect with confidence. I think building it with autonomy, but also keeping the human in the loop and making sure that is part of the equation moving forward.
I think another thing that'll be a challenge going forward that the whole team is up for, both the industry and the government team, is just the coordination of all the pieces and parts that have to come together. In addition to the platforms, there's a lot of integration that's going to be required on the autonomy system from the government side, and then the integration and the interaction with all the payloads, which is really what these platforms are about. That all of that coming together in the timeline that's laid out, I think is a big challenge. I think all of the teams are up for it, but I do think that will be a challenge overall.
I agree with Chris.
So I am about out of questions. I got one more, and then we'll open it up to if any of the members have any questions for them. So what suggestions do you have to improve the process, this type of process that may be happening for other programs going forward? What are some suggestions that you may have?
I think continuing to refine the approach. I mean, you could see it through just last year about how the communication, the acquisition strategy was evolving, and also the mechanism to employ and engage industry. So I think being able to continue it and deploy it across other initiatives, because I think it would really be beneficial to other emerging technology areas, and in particular as we start to integrate them into systems and larger integrated deployments. So continue to refine this mechanism, because it's new to me. I found it extremely beneficial, and I think there's still continued work that we could do as a team, industry, government, and NAMC, to make it even better and more effective long run and over a broader range of projects.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay. So I'll open it up. Does any of the members have any questions? So there's a caveat. So try to keep it at a high level. They're not gonna give away their secret sauce, and they do have the right of refusal of any question that they don't like. But other than that, you're fine. So go ahead.
How would you describe the maturity and risk profile and associated safety release challenges associated with vehicle mobility versus ISR payloads versus lethality versus autonomy? And all that integration that Chris talked about relative to safety release of a semi-autonomous vehicle.
I think Bob, to address your question, of all the ones you've threw out there, probably I think the most difficult one for all the programs right now, if you look at what's going on, is the autonomy part of the program. I think a lot of the other aspects of the program are, there's proven history of the prior programs, but the autonomy has been one that's been a challenge, more from the ATEC perspective than the evaluation perspective. I'm sure we'll do all we can to reduce the risk in those areas, but I would view that as that'll be the biggest challenge, I think, at the end of the day as we move forward. So.
Yeah, I would say, and to build on that, is maintaining a level of rigor to lay out that safety case and doing it in a fashion that allows that confidence to be built in a progressive fashion, because it's novel to have a robotic system with a safety case with equipage that spans that gamut of lethality to self-determined action. So I think that it's beholden on the industry teams to make sure that that rigor is in place and that it's communicated effectively, because the cultural aspects of the field, the soldier using the system, there's also cultural issues across industry and across government entities along the way to that point that have to mature as well.
Anything else? Go ahead, Matt.
This was tied to Option Man Fighting Vehicle. So we got an opportunity. We talked about RCV, but OMFV has been pulled back, and we're looking at everything across the board, from the weapons, mobility, whether it's optionally manned, how optionally manned, is it automated or autonomous. For all of you, what do you see as the greatest opportunities for you to get involved, again, in this reset? Or are you solely focused on RCV?
I would say I wake up in the morning looking forward to RCV. I'm energized by it. I know the team is. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think ultimately OMFV will combine into an effective machine or elements to support the broader mission. But personally, I'm RCV focused.
We are also, I guess if you look at OMFV, I'm no expert, but I think that it would be an interesting time. These vehicles, when OMFV, when Bradley gets replaced, it's going to be out there for a long time. It seems like the program that was recently canceled had a lot of the optionally manned kind of stuff taken out. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. There'll be a hard look at the electrification and the roboticization. The ability to automate that platform now out of the box so that that capability is there for the future. But from a team perspective, we're focused on RCV, and so we'll watch it from the sideline. So.
Anything else? Yeah.
Thank you. So I don't have any technology or strategy questions for you. I'm really curious because, some large defense contractors up there on the board. Non-traditional versus traditional, did you form new businesses to create these partnerships? And then how did that play out going through your traditional contracting at FLIR or Textron? Were there challenges, or you're going through that process now, are there a lot of challenges? Your traditional contractors, I assume. How are you working through the NAMC contracting process?
Yeah, I think the OTA environment does, challenge traditional defense contractors to really think differently and approach it. And I would say that, RCV was an opportunity for us to do that, to be reactive. I mean, working with Dave and the team at FLIR and Mike and Jeff Howe with How and How, as a combined team, we really approached it, with the mission focus of the technology and the solution, but also there's the contractual element, not only to meet the speed of need, but also the arrangements that, are statutory requirements for us to be able to be involved. So, without getting into any further, finer details, I think it is a challenge for bigger organizations to really figure out their battle plan to go address it. Particularly as the momentum in leveraging OTAs and for all their benefits, kind of make us rethink how we approach it.
But just a shout out to NAMC, right? I mean, you guys have a great database of capability statements and presentations for all the 435.
25.
All right, I just added 10 for you. I'm a BD guy, I always do this. But, you know, the 425 members, I mean, that database is pretty useful for us to go in and look for those capabilities that we need to fill out a capability set, but also to find that small business contracting requirement.
So for Pratt Miller, we are Michigan-based small business, non-traditional. So, you know, for us, NAMC's been, you know, a great avenue to get opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have a shot at, and also work with teammates that in some cases need some non-traditional support on their team. So it's been great from a small business perspective for sure.
I know you mentioned, Mr. Houghton, you mentioned the integration, and I'm sure the technology is the focus right now, but you mentioned platform. Has there been any work done on the actual platform design and engineering, or what stage will that occur at?
So yes, there's been a lot of work on the platform overall. Is your question specifically around the RCV entrant? Is that what you know for this phase?
Yeah, structure of what that vehicle looks like from a hardware perspective.
Yeah, so for this phase, you know, the Pratt & Miller and Kinetic team's approach really is just to change what's required to meet the requirements. So we really are working, you know, 90% of the platform is EMAV currently, and then we changed the integration and computing that's required to integrate the government RTK and manage the rest of the payload integration. But otherwise, the rest of the platform, we're building off what already existed for the EMAV platform.
Go. Yeah, from a Team Ripsaw standpoint, I think, you know, we brought to the demo, as Dave mentioned, kind of our capability at hand, and walked away with a revitalized look at what we needed to go do to make the end state effective in the long run. So, you know, we did have a generational improvement here at AUSA in October in DC. You would have seen the M5M platform there equipped for the RCV mission. And so that really shaping that platform to the mission as a generational progression of our collective experience was really, you know, our approach to how we deliver the most capability built to the RCV task as we could within, you know, a very short period of time, and with the schedule being paramount.
Hey, Sean, so coming out of the demo, were there things that, so you guys were going down, so you guys had already kind of come up with what that M5 was going to look like probably before then, right? Were there things that came out of the demo that you went back and said, yeah, maybe we want to look at something else, or we wanted to change something here or there?
I think it really informed and invalidated our assumption that, you know, modularity and adaptability of the platform was essential. Really, because, you know, while we have the stated requirements and the concept of employment, kind of to frame our near term, you know, the full potential of what a robotic combat vehicle could provide, you know, isn't yet realized, right? So, you know, as we go through and develop these systems, you know, the modularity piece, it's easy to talk to, but there's, you know, there's work to be done to actually employ it, right? So that it carries forward not only the rigor behind, you know, the implementation, but also the ability to flex and shape the full opportunity of RCV.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Any guess as to, it was talked earlier about trust, and always with robotic vehicles for years and years and years, including the very small ones that Kinetic and Endeavor have produced, trust was always a factor. In terms of vehicles that are so much bigger, much greater kinetic energy associated with them, Any guess as to the number of miles it's going to take for an autonomous large vehicles to develop that trust? Are you talking in terms of hundreds, thousands, or millions of miles?
I think, Bob, that's a great question. I think I'm gonna take that one to some degree. So, right now the government's in that process, right? So they've got the surrogate vehicles that are now in test. I think that is still to be known, right? I think there are still some things that have to be worked out between the testing community, autonomy, and safety on what number, how many hours, how many miles it's going to take before ATEC's going to be satisfied. And I think that's that's going to be a collective agreement in the end of what that's going to take. Anybody disagree with that?
And you're shaking that out with phase one, right?
Yeah, right. Obviously, General Kaufman knows probably more than I do now that even though I've only been away 6 weeks, some of the areas where the phase one vehicles are having some test issues as far as trying to get to a safety release. So. But anyway, anything else? Matt again?
I always have multiple questions. Okay, so we talked about two of the government objectives, and most of them are autonomy related. The first one is producing a platform that can deliver autonomy, but more than just navigation, but all of the other things we know an individual robotic combat vehicle is going to have to do in order for it to be an effective system that can either be an advanced teaming surrogate or a replacement for a manned platform. So that's the first question for individual platform autonomy. What do you need? But ultimately, the goals that we've seen in other presentations are that these things work as sections and platoons, as formations. What's the most important thing, in your opinion, that you need from the government, could be technology or guidance or otherwise, to make individual platform autonomy and unit group level platform a reality?
Yeah, I think the discussion of trust and the level of rigor to get a safety release and, is a component of it. But I think one technological element that really plays into that is communications, right? The networking between the systems. The ideal of a network optional platform is obviously the goal, but the trust and confidence along the way through an assured communications and agile communications to live in complex and dynamic environments, even as, Rellis campus for an A&M. I mean, that was a challenge for, technologies of today. So for those systems to work in tandem, vehicle-to-vehicle communications and the computing necessary to facilitate those messages between vehicles or the communication between vehicles, I think is a key technical component to realize the man-unmanned teaming vision.
I know we're a little ahead of schedule. Not bad. There's still barbecue beer, so go at it. And we'll be back with the next one at 3:30, but we may move it up.
If you guys want to see the NAMC space, you can go on up to the 8th floor. It's open, so you can just go through the last couple doors and you'll see the new office up there. But enjoy yourself and we'll reconvene in just a little bit.
Get your own NAMC pen.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The hard dollars at work.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for. I'm glad there was some relief.
So it's 2019.
All right, we're going to get started again. If you guys want to find a seat. All right, welcome back. I hope you guys had another beer or two. Next on the agenda, we're going to hear from Army Applications Lab. They're located on the 8th floor if you did the tour or wandered up there. And they're really AFC's engagement of industry for dual-use commercial technologies. So we have Neil Wendt and Chris Sankovich with us, who are going to talk to you about what they do, and specifically, or in addition to the FAR cohort that's going on right now. So I'm going to hand it over. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
might have to push the button.
Mic check. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Really appreciate that. Also, really appreciate the 2-drink minimum they have here. We sound a little bit more interesting after a couple beers, so.
We definitely feel a little awkward being the only ones dressed in jeans today.
Yeah.
You just hit it once. I just hit it once.
Yeah.
All right.
He's a recovering engineer, so we're working with him.
Blinking.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah. So, quick introductions. I'm as Neil said, an engineer, so that's why I immediately screwed up the mic, and feels a little awkward being up here. This is not my thing, but it's great to be a part of this. A little bit about myself. I joined the government about 11 years ago in the Armament Center, working on remote weapon station S&T, which is pretty relevant for a lot of the players here today. And then 5 years into it, I got matrix to PM Cruiser Weapons under the CROWS program, which I believe is the armament for RCV-L. And worked in the G3 at AFC for 6 months and hopped over to AAL after I realized I didn't want to do ops and I wanted to get back to engineering. So in AAL, I'm what's called a product innovation director, which is just a fancy word for like a project manager.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I'm actually born and raised here in Austin, Texas. For those of y'all that visit, I'm the unicorn that's actually from here. Went to the Air Force Academy, played football there, was an Air Force officer for 5 years, stationed in England for 3 years, Afghanistan for 7 months, and then South Carolina for 18 months. Broke away and was a Lean Six Sigma black belt for GE Oil and Gas for a few years. And then from that was in the startup entrepreneurial game for 5 years before I took this job about a year ago. I'm actually a consultant for Acme General, which has a RDT&E contract with Army Applications. So nothing I say up here reflects the visions of the government. You're not guaranteed a contract. I don't know, y'all have heard this before, right? But I think it's important that we bring up kind of our backgrounds because it helps explain the dynamic and the makeup of Army Applications Lab. And as Chris gets into this and explaining kind of the mission and vision, Army Applications Lab is about 40 different people. And it really is about a third, a third, a third. So a third active duty, a third government civilian, and then a third kind of consultants that bring that kind of breadth and experience within non-traditionals and can speak at all sides of the table. So they really staffed this kind of appropriately when you look at that.
Thanks, Neil. With that, I'm going to go over our mission. So I've been a part of Army Applications Lab for about 4 or 5 months, so I'm going to use my note card if that's fine with everybody. So our mission is to align innovative solutions and technologies with Army problems to rapidly discover, validate, and transition technology application. And really, you're going to ask, what do we do? And I break it down into 3 facets. We inform, we incubate and accelerate, and we transition. we inform the Army on the commercial market, and then we also inform the commercial market on Army problems. So I don't know if you're familiar with, or if anyone's familiar with the Army Applications Lab website, but I encourage everyone to go to it, especially the non-traditional types, and it's just www.aal.army, and you'll find a list of, how many problems is it?
16 different focus areas, as I recall. It might have changed a little bit, but 16 main areas.
Those 16 main areas give you a focus of where your tech could fit into solve an Army problem. Now, it's not a requirement, and that's going to be important later as we describe what AAL does. By incubate and accelerate, we accelerate non-traditional vendors through funding, mentorship, and networking. Just because AEL might not have funding for your specific solution at this moment, we might have a partner within CCDC or within a CFT that may have a market for your technology.
And that's a key thing we want to point out. So Army Applications Lab is right out about its 14th month. Army Futures Command, roughly about a year and a half. Down here, it's been there. There's debatable when it started, when it did, but what we're planning to build and what we're building towards is kind of being the conduit or a platform of available non-traditional solutions and then Army problems. And that's one thing that Chris just touched on, is defining Army problems and helping engage these Army units and saying, a lot of times they come and say, we need you to buy us this solution. Oh, it sounds like you already have your problem. You already have your solution. That's an acquisition. Go ahead and purchase. But it's when we show up and they're going, we don't actually know what we're going to do. And part of what Army Applications Lab does is they span what's available as far as commercial use across the United States that could potentially solve that problem and transfer over to an Army soldier, right?
And that last thing that we do is transition. So we need to align solutions to the Army's strategic problems. And we do that through partnerships with ASALT, with PEOs, and working with PMs. We don't see if technology doesn't have a transition path to finally get it into the soldier's hands, then you got to ask ourselves, what are we really doing here? So we're like our director likes to say, we're soldier obsessed, and that means working with ASALT. And we also reimagine uses for commercial technology. We do community office hours every other Wednesday, and tech will come in, or solution providers will come in with their tech. And sometimes it takes a minute for us to work with them and say, while you have a really cool medical solution there, you talked about reduced latency and over low bandwidth networks. And we have a market for that. And maybe that's where your tech fits better than what you initially thought it does.
Yeah, that's really one of the key things that we try to do is be that liaison and that facilitation, and that's why I pointed out kind of the representation of the Army Applications Lab employment, a third, right? Because we need to be able to talk across all different aspects and have that internal group collaboration to know what's going on and understand what we're looking for. Can I get a show of hands who had heard about Army Applications Lab before they showed up to Austin? Okay. Word's getting out there. High five. Look at that. How many of y'all thought y'all had a good definition of what we did? All right, we need to work on our messaging a little bit more, but that's what we do here. Anybody ever been up to the 8th floor before today? Of course, Steve, of course you have. So we're on the 8th floor here. I highly encourage y'all to check it out while you're here. It is an open door policy. You'll see the gate. We like to say we're the front gate of innovation and facilitating with the Army. But we really want y'all to check us out. As we get into our presentation a little bit more, we're going to go through our website, just kind of show y'all, give y'all a visual, and talk through the FAR cohort program. But highly encourage y'all to come check us out. That's what we're here for. You won't see any uniforms up there for the staff. It's supposed to be welcoming. We're supposed to be inviting. And one of the things I'm actually really proud of is whether it's the Chief of Staff of the Army, the Chief of Staff of the good Korea, or a 19-year-old, we had that, a month ago? A 19-year-old kid with a fantastic idea. It doesn't matter who walks through that door. They get the same treatment. They get the same briefs. They get the same conversation and advice and explanation of why we're here. And so I really think it's something that, we're at least getting right, or hopefully get it right. And so, but I highly encourage that before you head out, just go check out our space and understand it.
All right, so now you heard about you heard about what we do. Now I'm going to try to describe how we do it. So the first thing that we do is problem framing. And that's really identifying the underlying problem that a soldier has. And it's not a requirement. And Neil is going to go into this in detail whenever he describes the FAR cohort. We also provide that market survey that I described. You know, identifying best in market companies and commercial trends of investment. And we also do innovation sprints, cohorts and challenges, and really provide a space for a wide range of ideas and new interesting solutions, you know, engaged with the user. And once again, Neil is going to go into great detail with the cohort. And then you probably have heard of the AEL SIBRs, because it seems like the Army, you know, through AEL is providing a re-energized SIBR initiative. The way that we see SIBRs is that it's really to used to de-risk and to drive industry towards you know, areas they might not be considering. So if you see a SIBR topic and a lot of the commercial space isn't in that area, maybe SIBR could help focus, you know, this is where to spend your IRAD. And just to inform, so to us it's a very low risk, no cost to, you know, our customers of a way to get at interesting technology.
Okay, with that, I'm going to shift over and we're going to talk a little bit about our cohort. And this is just, I want to highlight, as Chris pointed out, this was just one way we solve some of the Army problems, and it's just another tool set. It's a product we use to help facilitate innovation within the Army. Unfortunately, we don't have slides, but we'll kind of talk through it. Have anybody here heard about the Field Artillery Autonomous Resupply Cohort? All right, what have you heard? What have you heard? Oh, okay. All right, I'm getting daggers over here. Sorry, we'll talk more later. Okay, what about y'all? What have y'all heard? Just applicators, y'all applied as well? How did y'all hear about it?
When I first heard AOC standing up, and then wanted to find out about AAL, and then when we came down to get briefed, that's when we got plugged in.
Okay, awesome. So it's kind of exactly what we want to have happen is we want to reach the customers, and we'll give a little bit of overview. That you can find this at aal.army/FAAR. This is the landing page we used and I'm sure y'all have seen it and saw us on webinars and events as we did it. But let's hit the play on this because it kind of gives an overview of the long-range precision fire problem we're trying to solve.
There are still some things that we have not been able to update in regards to howitzer operations and how we conduct field artillery operations. The automated resupply is going to be what's absolutely critical to the future warfighter and future artilleryman. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would have a resupply solution that I could drop at the back of the howitzer and it would automatically mate up to the howitzer and provide the class 5 while it's also providing fuel and has a little canister that you could open up and that chief could grab that back box of MREs or a couple cases of water and have like an immediate 24-hour go package kind of thing. I think that would be really critical for some of the high visibility, high mobility fire missions and mission sets that we can potentially face in the future.
All right, thanks, Brian. So that kind of gives an overview. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but when you see the soldiers hauling those 100-pound 155 rounds, it really kind of puts a visual into what we were trying to solve. Now, going through the kind of storyline of how we got here, when we first started engaging with LRPF CFT, they said, we want you on the autoloader. We want you on the autoloader. Well, they had a couple other solutions. They had a government solution. They had an external solution. And we said, you know, do you really want to do kind of a horse race with the third solution? How are you going to actually resupply this thing? Because if your goal in 10 years is to fire the self-propelled howitzer system from 3 rounds a minute to 10 rounds a minute, but you're only going to keep 40 rounds, the 5th minute you have the world's most expensive paperweight, right? And the resupply effort is the most vulnerable this thing is, right? When you think about it, if it's got to sit, if we fire, they have counter detection, they know where we're at, and then it's got to sit in the field while these soldiers run 40, 100-pound rounds back and forth, that's a big vulnerability. So it actually took us about 2 months with engaging with the LRPF and helping frame that problem statement of, how are you going to resupply this thing? Oh, wow, hadn't really thought about that, right? So we went out and what we did was we got some documentation, what we call visual representation of the problem, and then we started saying, okay, what different verticals that exist in the commercial industry could help solve this, right? Amazon can deliver me a toothbrush inside the next 4 hours, right? But we're still doing manual loads, we're still doing hand receipts on these ammunition rounds. So we said, okay, as a unit, what could help solve this, right? Let's think outside the box. And as General Rafferty, the LRPF CFT commander likes to say, he's been in the Army all his life, right? He works very well in the constraints of the box. So he needs other people to help him view it outside the box. And we said, okay, well, obviously there's going to be a robotics component to this. Computer vision, UAS, that's drones, right? We need off-road capability in the vehicles. Leader-follower, right? Autonomous vehicles. So where do these exist? Where are these hubs of innovation through the United States? We said, okay, well, we're here in Austin for a reason. We also, Army Applications Lab also has an office in New York City for a number of different reasons. Main one, that's where the money is. Number two, it's the second largest concentration of small businesses and non-traditionals in the United States outside of San Francisco, right? So that makes sense. Boston Dynamics, they're heavy in my Lincoln Labs, heavy in robotics. Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, right? Heavy in robotics and the things that help these robotics companies. San Francisco, that's kind of a no-brainer. Well, and a big thing that we did in this, we also had 3 different webinars. We kicked off a launch event here. We had a couple webinars explaining the problem set and going out to these solvers and saying, here's our problem. We have no idea how we're going to solve it. You're smart in what you do. Why don't you apply and help us figure out how to move forward on this? So it's kind of flipping it. Instead of going out and saying, here are the requirements, what we're doing is using this FAR cohort to help us write the requirements. So each one of these companies that we still down selected to got $150,000 and they were participating in a 12-week program. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But a big thing that happened was when we did these roadshows, we had people who wouldn't have noticed it, wouldn't have known where to apply, wouldn't have understand FedBizOps or now beta.sam.gov, right? Is that the new one? Yeah. Yeah. So they don't know. Instead, what we do is we do some recruiting, we do some outreach, we do some targeted approach, and we have these one-on-one conversations, we have these small conversations, and people engage. They ask questions. They wonder what, they say, hey, well, what about this and this and this?
What about OSHA?
Yeah, yeah. So that was another funny thing we found out in week 2. We were trying to come up with a comparable that exists in commercial industry for this problem. Well, I'm sure y'all are aware of OSHA, right? Anything over 42 pounds, that's a 2-man lift. Well, you saw on the video, there's soldiers just running with 100-pound rounds. And if anybody could think of something that exists in the United States that's not breaking the law, i.e. OSHA, that this is comparable to, please see me after this, because we could not come up with a comparable in commercial industry. But, the Army just looks at it and goes, oh yeah, we'll just use soldier power. Just throw soldiers at it until we can get it done. And so it's kind of funny when I don't know if funny is the right word, but it was kind of interesting to come up with that. There really isn't a direct comparison. Now, there's logistics units that ship 100 pounds and heavy stuff, and that's kind of what we went for. But kind of circling back, is the benefit we got out of these engagements was it started changing the conversation. Also, some of these non-traditionals, there's what we call a viral coefficient. If you reach 1, you reach 5 or 6, right? And you have these conversations, and we went out to San Francisco, and quite frankly, they said, we don't want to help you because of what your mission is. And you can infer kind of what that means. And we said, wait. What do you think our mission is? Because what we're trying to do is make our soldiers safer, right? Again, explaining to them that the most vulnerable time for the howitzer system is when we're reloading, because that's when the soldiers are out of the howitzer. That's when it's sitting stagnant for 30 minutes. So we're trying to make better, safer, more efficient systems to protect our soldiers. Oh, well, I didn't really think about it like that. Yeah, I can help with that. Did you think about this, and this? And another thing we already saw, they go, wait, you're the U.S. military. Don't you already have this figured out? So it was a little peek under the cover. But with that, we touched over 400 different companies across 5 different cities, 3 different road shows. We had 87 applications, 4 of which are in this room. We'll talk more later. Come find me. And we down selected to 6. And with that, when that down select, we gave each company $150,000 and contracted them to produce capability design papers at the end of the 12-week period. Because another thing is when we're doing the recruitment, one of the robotics companies goes, so about this cohort, you want me to produce a prototype on what I think you might need? No, I want you to inform me of what you can do based on end user feedback. So week 1, they were here in Austin, Texas, kind of getting the orientation. Week 2, we took them out to Fort Bliss in El Paso. 401 FA was outstanding with their support of what they did. So they had a training, table 6, they were doing a training element. And we said, can we come watch? Can we bring 30 non-traditionals out there, look, feel, touch, and ask questions? And they go, I don't know. I don't think so. But by the time we got out there, they're like, wow, this is awesome. Their soldiers were engaging. Their soldiers were informing. Our non-traditionals, our companies were getting out there and actually seeing the problem. They were look, feeling, and touching, lifting up these 100-pound rounds. We went back. There was virtual weeks in between there where we're working on the capability design paper. We're pushing through and saying, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And we just had a fantastic week at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, HQ for long-range precision fires. General Rafferty, the director, and had about 40 supporting members of his cross-functional team there. And to see non-traditionals and subject matter experts be in these round-robin environments and talking and discussing about what is in the realm of possible to help inform the white paper or the capabilities design paper that they're going to deliver off of this was really powerful. It was incredible, actually. So from that, we got 3 more virtual weeks, and then we're going to round out with a big presentation on April 1st. All y'all in this room are invited down here at 1400 on the 8th floor. We'll be doing kind of our public presentation. We have a briefing to the director of the LRPF in the morning, as well as the government enterprise in the morning. But we're going to have an open presentation to where you can engage with not only the companies, but also the LRPF, and kind of understanding the process of what we went through in this cohort. The reason this is so powerful is it's not a guess, right? They're taking these 6 capability design papers, and they're going to write the requirement of what exists for autonomous resupply. So it was powerful in the sense that we understand the scope of what's available in the commercial industry. We've discussed the problem, we've turned it over, we've pivoted quite a few times from the actual problem and informed it, and we've gotten direct feedback from the director and his staff of experts saying, you know, I haven't thought about that. Yeah, that's a good point. We should probably explore that a little bit more. So the best thing about this is the requirement we're gonna get is not gonna box, and I'm sure y'all are all familiar with this, right? They're gonna write a requirement saying we want something innovative. It needs to have 4 wheels, transmission, an axle, 4 seats, need to be able to see out of it, and we gotta be able to steer it. All right, so you want a car. No, I want something completely innovative. Well, the way you wrote this requirement, the only innovation I can give you is a red car or a blue car, right? So that's, again, the benefit of what the big Army is going to get out of it. Not only are they better informed about what's in the realm of possible, but they're going to get requirements that aren't written from somebody inside the box to meet this specific niche. They're still going to solve their problem, but it's with the information of what exists out there. And I really think it's going to help a lot of different aspects of the DoD, specifically the Army, but the DoD acquisition system as a whole.
Yeah, just imagine what your innovators and engineers could do with a week spent out in the field. So day 1, whenever we get out to the range on that week 2 with our cohort members, we're in El Paso. It starts to rain. All right, who would think that would rain in El Paso? So now you're getting that nice.
It's like 40 degrees.
Yeah,
too.
you're getting that nice chocolate soup in the desert that these guys in sneakers. You know, we show up in boots and everything, but they're innovators, so they're in their skinny jeans and sneakers. Yeah. And then the next thing that happens is that the unit realizes that the type of round they got doesn't match the SDZs that they have set up. And these innovators get to experience this in real time. They're going, how could that happen? How could you get a different rounds than what you were expecting from the ASP? And we're like General Rafferty says, this is just something we live. Because in TAMUS, one round is just as good as a training round could be one or another, interchangeable, until you set up that SDZ because they have different characteristics. So then they got to experience that. And then what ends up happening the next day is we finally get to witness the resupply portion. The soldier drives up in his cat, hops out, has a sledgehammer, and starts whacking the side of the tracks to realign the tracks. And they go, holy moly, what is this now? This is the greatest army on the planet, and you have to swing a sledgehammer to realign your tracks. You can't pay enough for that experience for these innovators to experience this in real time. You know, and like Neil says, it's not a requirement. You know, we're not telling you that you have to do X, you know, Y, Z, you know, and meet millistandard 882E. It's come here and tell us how you would solve this, you know, because you're probably smarter than us on this.
Absolutely. With that, we can keep talking, but does anybody have any questions? I see a hand. Nope. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's time for the interpretive dance section while they. Yeah. Yay, Brian.
Brian, I owe you a beer later.
Yeah, in the green bucket over here.
I think what you're doing is great, and thank you for doing it. Where does TRADOC fit in? Because you're going to come up with some unbelievable industry will bring it to you, but there's no requirement. Now what?
So on week 7, the one that we just finished at Fort Sill, you know who we had in the room with us for roundtable discussions is the ACM, and we had the CDIDs. So they're part of this solution up front. And this, just as much as, you know, it's a cohort of different technologies, it's also a cohort on the government end, where we have program manager, self-propelled howitzer in the room. We have the CDID. We have what is ACM now? Army Capability Manager, formerly the TICM. We have the user. We have the requirement writers. Everybody is in the room in the same moment to have these discussions, and all in you know, instead of separately in real time.
And that's also a great point. We also don't know. I mean, that was a fantastic idea to have all of them. It was the value we got out of it. But we're also trying to figure this out. And we're trying to push the envelope and figure out what's next and how to transition that. So we're open to suggestions, but bringing everybody together, the value that we got out of that, and then seeing what's within the realm of possible absolutely is going to help get that transition, because that's what we think about it. It's one thing to do this, and if it goes nowhere, how do we help our soldiers, right? How do we help our soldiers be safer? How do we help our soldiers be safer through innovation if we can't transition this to big Army? Good question. Sir, wait for the mic.
Is part of your process going to be at all looking at the past and taking advantage of lessons learned? Because part of this problem has been solved before, the automation part of it, not the autonomy. Because in the AFAS-FARV and Crusader programs, most of what the soldiers mentioned as the problems he was trying to solve had a solution and was demonstrated and was, you know, pretty much ready to go to production before other things got in the way.
Absolutely. We're not saying we're the only ones with a good idea, and this is iterative. And I think when you see what some of the things that Army Applications Lab does, we were after DIU, we were after AFWorks, and from that we get to learn. But specifically within this cohort program, we're just an avenue to help LRPF, to help inform on LRPF. And absolutely, we had the companies last week literally requesting some of the previous data of what has happened. Like, can you talk to us about how we understand the issues with TARDIS communicating across the systems, right? Can we have discussions about this? And so we are by no means sitting here saying we are the only ones that are going to come up with a smart idea. We're just looking at it from a little bit of different viewpoint, but we're absolutely going to be referencing what worked and what didn't work and what can we expand on. And another thing too, parts of the whole innovation aspect of this is looking at what's currently on the shelves within labs that are within the DoD, right? So it's not just, hey, we're going to go out. I mean, the Army Applications Lab is really kind of tailored to look for the commercial industry, but we do have elements that look and say, what's on the shelves that has been in these labs that just hasn't been turned over yet? So there is an element that is looking at that. I think a big point of why we're up here and why we're talking about this, 2 NAMC companies actually made it to the final cut, and a lot of NAMC companies actually applied. I think this is pretty relevant. I think also utilizing, understanding how NAMC can kind of fit in this and be an option has been very powerful. As we said, we're soldier obsessed, so as long as we stay out of jail, we're gonna find ways that can get these technologies transitioned and into soldiers' hands. So we're really looking at it. Part of what the government side of Army Applications Lab and Army Futures Command is trying to do is understand what needs to change within the Army acquisition structure, right? What kind of conversations do we need to have? What kind of regulations need to change? What do we need to be aware of? And what are our options on flexibility, right? How do we get across the valley of death on that TRL level to help bring innovation and make our soldiers more effective? Another question.
Yeah, just real quick, are you covering all PMs and PEOs, all products?
Yeah, as Neil just said, that's the plan. We're trying to. Right now, as far as government product innovation directors like myself, there's only 3 of us, so we're stretched kind of thin. I'm focused on, I would say we're more CFT aligned than PEO aligned. I'm focused on LRPF and NGCV. And then we have another, another person that's focused on APNT and soldier lethality, and then so on down the line. But we have a team, we have an ASALT rep within the office, a lieutenant colonel that just came out from being a PM, who's acting as that like transition lead and liaison between us and the PMs and PEOs.
And one of the things we're finding that as we find these innovative technologies in commercial companies that exist, there's not a direct path. When you look at this from LRPF and the self-propelled howitzer system, well, what happens if we have a drone that fits into this capability? How does that fit into the direct PMs or the traditional PMs and PEOs that have typically supported this? So there are questions that are getting brought up and things that we have to look at from a new point of view of saying, does it belong in these traditional PMs? Does it belong in the traditional PMs that take care of the drones? Now, for the drones, we realize a number of different things: load capacity, length of travel, stealth aspects. So, I mean, it's something we need to be aware of down the line, but there's these questions that come up as saying, hey, if we go find a great technology that fits it directly, but doesn't necessarily fit into these traditional PM and PEOs, what do we do? And the good news is we're starting to have these conversations with the programs of record and with those offices. But we would absolutely love to be involved with every single one of the PMs and PEOs. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, wait for the mic.
I see it really innovative having 12 weeks and then having these companies come out and see it hands-on and try to develop the actual requirements. What was the actual contracting vehicle that those people went towards to get that? I didn't follow that part. Was it an OTA or what? Did they come to you at the research?
Yeah, I think that's all right. So as you heard before with Neil's introduction, Neil is a contractor for a company called Acme. He's a sub through Allion. So AEL holds a innovation contract with Allion that's designed for innovation sprints, and this is executed under that contract. No, and that's we're looking towards NAMC and OTA, other consortiums, to execute similar work off of understanding the quickness for transition. It's like a double-edged sword. Through Allion and design sprints, I can execute, I can start very quickly, but then I have pain on the back end for a smooth transition. If I do it through an OTA, I have a slower upfront, contracting period, but then I have a very nice transition on the back end. Yeah, pain on the
And I think that's something as a lab that they're strongly committed to finding different contracting mediums in order to execute some of these similar different. Now, mind you, this is just one avenue that we can take, but they recognize it, and I think it was just more speed of what they had in order to operate and then figure out how to adjust some of these other contracting methods to facilitate this kind of innovative problem solving. That's a good question. Yes.
What's the metric that you're driving towards? How will you measure your success of an organization?
We literally asked this question last week at LRPF. LRPF is our customer in this current iteration. And we said, okay, what are the key metrics that prove that this is a huge success? And we're still developing this, but it's going to center around time and development, and looking at kind of looking ahead and saying, can we reach these goals? and how did these kind of tool sets and how did these approaches help us reach these goals quicker, and how many iterations. So we have internal metrics for AAL and kind of engaging and looking at kind of throughput in the sales cycle. It's essentially a sales cycle. But I really think the LRPF is going to focus on not only the availability of capabilities, but how quickly it was compressing that timeline for development.
I have a follow-up question. So is there a certain size problem, type of problem that you're focused on? You know, if you look at the broad spectrum of problems that the Army has, when you get to the very large systems, like say OMFV, there's only a couple companies in the world that can produce a solution to that, right? And millions and millions of small innovative companies. So how do you make that, bridge that gap, that valley of death between the companies that you're working with and the big primes?
That's a very great question that's very loaded. As far as problem sets that we get, it's based on our internal customers. So LRPF, for example, said, hey, we can work on this. And it's not an overarching, and there's a certain sweet spot, that Army Application Lab functions, right? I think OMFV would be inappropriate for Army Applications Lab because of the scale of what it is and what needs to get done with it. So how do we bridge that gap? And so I think that kind of answers the first part of your question of it depends on the customer and what the customer wants us to solve. FAR is a very big problem set, and I think we could probably go a little bit bigger now that we've done it. We can definitely go a little bit smaller, especially with kind of the database of solution developers that we're providing. If you have a very good, appropriate problem set, we can execute quickly. But switching to the second half of your conversation, how you bridge that valley of death, we're still working through that. However, by having exposure in some of these events like April 1st, by having exposure with the PMs and PEOs that were at the week 7 and having these conversations, and how do we look at this into a design sprint, or how do we get more for the bigger contract dollars and separate and say, what kind of development aspects do we have? So we're working through that currently. I think we've got a good plan and a good hunch on what's going to work and what's not, but we're also open to suggestions, and our key thing is getting through that valley of death again to help the soldier. I'll pass it for. How do you think of this?
I also think that there's an opportunity for primes to engage in this process as well, to attend our event on week 12 and to engage these innovators themselves for these possible solutions, and as well as we had a unique opportunity where I had a prime actually pass off a solution provider to us for us to take a look at. So it goes both ways, I think. I think we're out of time, right?
The good news is that they are our new neighbors with our new office, so they're around a lot if you guys have questions. But thank you, Neil and Chris, so much.
No, thank you for the chance to explain our mission. Again, come up, see us on 8th floor. We'll hang out if y'all have more questions. But 3 things we focus on is, for non-traditionals, access to capital, which we're working on, transparency and accessibility. So we're always willing to talk, and we're always willing to be open and honest about where we're at. So thank you again for the time.
Thank you. Go see Macon. She's got something for you. Okay, so last but very much not least, we're going to bring up General Kaufman, who is Director of the NGCV CFT, and Mr. Langout, who is Director SES of GVSC. It's hot. So thank you so much, sirs, for joining us. I know it wasn't too hard to probably pull you both away from Michigan during early March.
55 degrees in Michigan right now. It's amazing.
It's warmer than when I left, so that's good. To start off, I think that you both are in a very unique situation being located at the Detroit Arsenal, in that you have the PMs and the S&T community and the contracting command community, along with the CFT in one spot. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the only place that is true. I might be mistaken. So I think I would be interested to hear, how has the proximity allowed you guys to collaborate in your teams to work closely together?
So, where you stand is where you sit, but none of that works unless you're communicating. You can, as for the tactical folks in the room, the intel cell's distance from the operations cell matters, but what matters more is a system to move information back and forth. I think because we're co-located there in Detroit, it enables us to communicate better, but you know, it has been a process to establish systems and make sure that we're communicating back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. You know, a good example is Dr. Jetty was in our formation last Friday, and just because of logistics and everything, he spent time in my office, and you were out of town, but your number 2 guy, Warren Sponsor, and the meeting had started, and I saw him standing outside the hall, and I said, "Come on in, Warren," you know, and it was just very relaxed, and which I like. And so, you know, so I'm looking around the room, and it's General Cummings and his staff, and it's myself and some of our guys, and there's Warren at the CFT, and we're all having some really good discussions about, we were talking about robots. And, you know, I just thought, this is the way it needs to be. I didn't say we were perfectly aligned in all of that conversation, and that's okay. It's good to have the debate, but the fact that we could just do it all together, and it wasn't hard to do that. And so I thought, hey, so perfect timing.
That's great. Okay, so RCV as a top Army modernization priority. I know NAMC is very proud of the fact that through the GVS OTA, in FY19, 66% of our funding actually went to non-traditionals. And we keep those calculations because that's why we were created, was to engage the small businesses and non-traditionals. And I know that sometimes that's not always apparent when there might be a traditional as prime, but with the statute, there is non-traditional participation. I was wondering if you could shed some light on the government perspective of working via an OTA-based consortium, but primarily leveraging small businesses and non-traditional defense contractors, as well as our traditional OEMs, and how do you see this advancing innovation?
Yeah, so we want anyone with a good idea or a good product to work with the government so that we can get that best athlete in the hands of our soldiers. Bottom line, any size, it doesn't matter. You know, one challenge that wasn't really talked about at 2 o'clock was, you know, when it went through NAMC, I mean, it took a lot of communicating and marketing on our side that this was a good idea, that this was something that we wanted to do as a government. There were senior leaders in the Army that were unfamiliar, so we had to go through that. And then as far as the OTAs, I'm gonna hand it over to Jeff, but before I do, I know the CFTs are the new buzzword and, you know, little balls of friction inserted throughout our Army to institute positive change. But when it comes to RCV, let there be no mistake, I've got 2 people working on it. Jeff's got 200. Okay, so the RCV is really born out of the science and technology community, and it's his team that's been doing much of the heavy lifting. So.
Well, thanks, sir. So, yeah, so we obviously love the OTA format. You know, it enables you to get things done quicker, and I got it. There's a lot of things we can do to make it work quicker, and I know that our folks at ACC Detroit Arsenal are very committed to improving that. So, you know, you never want to be satisfied, but yeah, I mean, goodness gracious, there's 400 and something family members. So to me, that just gives us great opportunity, and it enables us to be, enables us to move around quicker. And so, you know, we like that. It's a good way to do it for the experimentation kind of things that we're doing. It's not a one size fits all. It's a great tool to have in the box. And so, and obviously we're using it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, and we fully believe that FAR is not a bad word. There's a place for everything, and we hope we're just one of those tools in the arsenal for you. So as a follow-up question, you know, we do have 425 members that feel mostly, I think, you guys can talk to me after, but positively about their experience in using OTAs, and I know that I have members that are like, hey, can we get this to go through you? But you have, you know, 425 people that can help educate when you do run into a problem like that. So do you have any, I'm sorry, I should elaborate, educating other people when you want to use us. So do you have any points for how we can help make that easier for you when there are big programs like that. Do you not feel like there's enough education being done around the OTA-based consortiums at the higher levels?
I don't think there's a knowledge gap on the concept or, you know, how it's intended to use, but it wasn't a household name, you know, for some of the senior leaders in the Army. So at first they were saying, all right, so you're outsourcing all your work, what the hell are you gonna do, right? I mean, and once it was explained and, oh, okay, I see, this is actually a good thing for the government. And yeah, so your organization, others like it, I mean, are vital, I think, to really give small business, big business a voice and somewhere to go. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I would just add that, right, communication is hard. I don't care how hard you try. So, you know, I didn't know the website of the last guy, and I'm part of the command. So, shame on me. But I would say, gosh, we're trying really hard to communicate better, and I'm not trying to put in a plug for MDEX, but it's going to sound like it. You know that we've got in Detroit a little later this year, towards the end of May, and we have been so intentional about trying to make sure that we have a bunch of time set aside for small business, not just to hear from the big bad government that's difficult to contract with, but also the industry up there that needs all of the small business. So we've got a bunch of time set aside to encourage the small business. And I know personally, I put a lot of energy into selling that, because you're right. The more people on the team, the better chance we got of getting something done. And I appreciate what the guys at AAL are doing. They've got, you know, a very intentional marketing strategy to try to bring more folks in. So between all of those things, I think that'll give the Army a better chance to connect with the folks that we need to connect with. Over.
And we really just, you know, want to be a partner to you in that type of communication, the swim lanes and how that is different. So I think that's great, and I think the plug for MDEX is great. NAMC will have a showing there, so that'll be good. So earlier we had a panel from the industry perspective on RCV. Light and medium and the lessons learned. And I want to make that a little broader from a NGCV standpoint, because it is a program portfolio and we understand that. So I was wondering if you could just take a few minutes maybe from your perspectives on what you think went well with RCV or with other programs that are going through the NGCV portfolio, and lessons learned, and any feedback that you can give to industry from your perspective.
Yeah, I think the RCV program, if you look at it and really peel it back, with the advent of Army Futures Command and what we're trying to do, the robotics community listened very, very intently. And we had conversations, and they were inquisitive, and those two-way communications were very effective, and then they acted. And so one of the positive things that came out of it was we thought we were going to get maybe kind of MCOT's solutions to RCV light and medium. You know, we didn't think that, and what we got was pretty darn close to purpose-built. Industry moved very fast in this space. And the two that won, outstanding, congratulations, but we saw it across the board. It wasn't just in those two. And like, the government's serious. It wants to do things differently. Sometimes, you know, we have a hard time getting out of our own way. But bottom line is, I think the RCV program and experimentation is a model for better communication with industry, keeping things simple, being totally transparent, and really now the next step, and it kind of gets back to, I think it was your earlier question, like, we don't know how we're going to fight with these things. You know, so some people presume that they'll be their own platoons, controlled from a position of relative safety, and those platoons will have sufficient autonomy and capability to fight the enemy at the place of our choosing. Others believe that it's going to be a wingman concept, so maybe a platoon of 4 is really 2-man, 2 unmanned. We don't know. But that's why we're doing it. And at the end of the day, all I really want is for the nastiest places on earth where there's danger in every direction, that we put a robot there instead of a human, as long as that robot can perform equal to or greater than a human. And that's really hard. But there's some areas, and I'm sorry, I'm on a roll, there's some areas that the human standard isn't that high, right? I mean, and you just take things like gunnery scores, right? Like identification of enemy. What percentage of a concealed enemy does a human pick up, even with the incredible sights that we have? Well, it's not 95, okay? And I think it's closer to, somewhere within 10 points of that. But, so it doesn't have to be 100%. And that's important because we got to go into these things realistic with our eyes wide open.
I agree. No, I think it's been a great success the way it's been running so far. I'm super encouraged, and I'm just going to continue to encourage. We need to quit trying to be perfect. We need to be 80% solutions to figure stuff out. I think at some point, sir, we're just going to need to take some of these things and go give them to a unit and say, hey, here, go play. And go let them do something at the NTC, and way beyond what we're talking about right now, because that may end up being what it's going to take. Because I think if we're not careful, we'll talk about this forever, because we're always going to be doing the sensitivity analysis, and at some point, I think we get 80% solution and move out. But
so I'm sorry, as a follow-up to that, General Kaufman, and then actually I have a specific question for you, Mr. Langout. But how do you see vehicles like the JLTV and the AMPV fitting into the NGCV portfolio without having the technology right now?
So, look, the AMPV is under my portfolio. The JLTV is not. It's in CSCSS. But I'm at least conversant. I'm not an expert on the JLTV, but I'm conversant. And I think we've done a pretty darn good job of raising this question when Jeff and I do the science and technology reviews. Is, okay, how do you retrofit the force? Because it's going to take you, many, many years to take a new piece of equipment and outfit the entire Army. It's monumental. It's, the magnitude of scale is enormous. So we have to be able to retrofit those. And I think, depending on what it is, that we're prepared to do that. But we also have to say, all right, look, this is where we're going to cut the line. Because if I spend 20 years upgrading every, AMP-V that we fielded out there to have all the same technology as the Bradley replacement, is that what we want? The purpose of the vehicle is to move people on the battlefield under relative safety, and it doesn't have to have everything. So we got to be, make some prudent decisions.
That makes sense to me. Mr. Lang, I'm going to keep circling back to RCV for a moment, because personally, I'm very proud of the role that NAMC got to play with both of your teams in that kind of 18-month acquisition window, in doing some really novel things we haven't seen for a program of that scale before. So starting, in August 2018 with a Soldier Innovation Workshop, which are some of the coolest things I've ever done, to be able to really hear from the war fighter in that setting and ideate, to the demonstration at Texas A&M Rellis, and then to where we are now. And that really is a testament to your staff, sir. They really, as General Kaufman said, you had 200 people working on it and they executed it. So I guess the same question I had before, kind of, do you have any top successes or lessons learned from your perspective on the acquisition plan of that and doing those touch points all along?
Well, I think that's what we're charged to do in Army Futures Command, is that much more engagement with the soldiers along the way as we inform the requirement. And the way I look at it, you almost can't talk to the guys and gals too much. Now, right, everybody's got an opinion, so if you bring 100 people in the room, you're going to get 100 opinions, and that can cause complications and all that. But we just got done doing a virtual experiment just this past Friday, And, I hauled Dr. Jetty in there and I said, look, here's 60 guys and gals from Fourth ID playing this big video game to figure out how RCVs are going to play. So unclassified, but for them playing these video games for a week, they decided that they needed more range on ATGM, they decided they needed some non-line of sight stuff, and they decided they needed to maximize UASs more. Well, okay, I just said that. There's a whole pile of people that probably go, well, duh, I could have figured that out. Well, guess what? We hadn't before. So, all of that right there, is data to inform the next step. And so we've got, half a dozen of these virtual experiments that we're doing, and then that goes into the modeling simulation that ultimately goes in to the hardware, so we can go out and actually play with it. So the intention by which we're doing these soldier experiments and bringing the kids in, and I say kids, Lord have mercy, they are children, is really. I met this one guy. His name was Christian, and he's like, he says, yeah, I know how to play this game. He said, he says, you guys dedicated a whole day to teach us how to play the video game. How old are you? And I said, well, I'm 57. He said, you know how long it took us to figure this game out? Oh, I don't know. We had it figured out, by the first break, and y'all had a whole day planned for us. Let me tell you something, that's important, because all of us people figuring out what requirements and what weapon systems need to look like are old. Right? And all of those kids, they're like, they were figuring stuff out in 10 minutes. And the trainers were telling, so that's good data back to us as we think about how to work through these things.
Absolutely. Okay, I promise we're going to move on from RCV now, because I know you guys have other priorities that you want to be able to talk about. And I'm interested both in those priorities and any technology capabilities that have surprised you, or specifically that you're looking to be surprised by or looking to as you move forward.
Yeah, physics rules the earth, right? I don't know in the next 10, 20 years if we're going to have stronger, lighter metal. Right? And there's some people out there that believe that, you'll be able to reduce the base armor and base structure to the point, to a point to make the vehicle very light, because APS is going to carry the day. And I believe at some point in the future that'll happen. And I think technology will get us there. But we're not there now, and I don't think we're going to be there anytime soon. We're always going to need the base armor. So then what other innovative ways can we reduce weight on the vehicle? Look, I'll just tell you, wherever we fight in the world, the bridges and infrastructure do not support, a heavy vehicle. And everyone says, well, yeah, but you got the tank, you got to get that across too. Well, what do we do till we get the tank across? Why don't we get across the river, secure the far side, get eyeballs on the enemy, so that we can then go into bridging operations, which, as we all know, is perhaps, I'm pretty definitive, it's the most complex operation that we can conduct while being shot at. So, innovation on where we can save weight. And we just published, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm sure some of you have, the characteristics that we're looking for as we move forward in optional unmanned fighting vehicle. They are very broad. They are broad to the point that I don't think anyone in this room could disagree with a single one of them. It's like, I love America. Okay, yeah, I love America. I don't like communists. I don't like communists. Okay, it's that, but it's carry infantrymen to a point of relative advantage on the battlefield, keep pace with the M1 tank, be upgradable. And now what we're asking by this Friday is industry to come back and say, okay, look, this is kind of the specificity we need. Right? This is where we want to make trades, but we really need some good information and some hard left and right limits on, I don't know, you pick it, mobility, survivability, lethality, whatever it is. And then we'll start with those broad characteristics, and then we'll neck them down through the acquisition strategy until we write requirements, no kidding, hard and fast requirements for the production contract after the down select. Maintain competition, get best in breed, best athlete, and frankly, if we see a company that's not an OEM that builds vehicles that has great technology, we could treat that and say, hey, listen, this is what we want on our vehicle. Match it or do better. That's kind of, as far as the requirement side of what we're looking for. The other thing that I find very, very interesting in, this problem has not been solved, and I don't care. Well, if it's been solved, I haven't seen it, is aided target recognition, stationary on the move. There's a lot of people working it. We have a significant effort going on right now. But that is a hard problem to solve, and it gets back to data. And I wish I had a nickel every time someone said data's the problem, right? That's the biggest challenge we have, because it is, but there's different types of data. There's some really encouraging advances in synthetic data to train algorithms, and that, if that pans out, it'll be a game changer. Game changing, because I don't have to, if I have all I need is one image of an potential adversary's vehicle, and I can do thousands and thousands of test runs on algorithms in a synthetic environment. Game changing. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the fragility of the algorithm on the edge. So can a can of spray foam spoof it? Okay, what is going to spoof that algorithm? Very concerned about that. And then finally, I'm a tanker. I want light track that can carry a lot of weight. Okay, light track that can carry a lot of weight. And there's some advances being done in that space, but the problem's not solved yet. So, Jeff?
Sure. I want to give you what you want, right? So I say this all the time. I said, our Army, we are only encumbered by our imagination. And people like me have to say, oh yeah, but there's this physics stuff that gets in the way. So we're always the cold water that walks in the room. But no, I agree with everything you said, sir. And I would say the things that are by definition, all those things are important to me as well. I would add to that. I think there's, trying to decide if I want to go down this road or not. Let me just say this. There's been gazillions of dollars spent by the science and technology community to get a bunch of stuff to technology readiness level 6. But I've got this cartoon in my head that there's nothing that the S&T community can do. And by the way, I was in the PM ASALT community long before I was on this side of the fence. There's nothing that I can do other than extreme encouragement and performing to promise to push that technology across the Valley of Death Bridge. The cartoon needs to show ASALT and our program managers with a big lasso, or in Texo, lassoing that technology and pulling it across. Here's the challenge, though. Our PMs have got so much to do. They got so many things in their world, and anybody that says they know what it's like to be a PM, unless you've been one, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so it's an extremely complicated world, and part of their job is manage risk. And every time they have to say, I'm going to take a government solution and tell industry, congratulations, go use this, they just increase their risk to the government. And it's just the system. It's just the system that we have. And so when I look at technology, whether we're talking about opposing piston engines, that's at TRL 6. And I was, again, sorry to bring it up, but it's just late breaking information. I was with Dr. Jetty Friday, and I said, dang, sir, now it's in your court. You gonna pull this thing across the line, or are you gonna sit back and go, yeah, He wasn't there when it all got started 5 years ago. Guess what? Personalities constantly are changing, right? So whether it's the advanced running gear that's now got, 1,000 miles running around out there in Yuma, whether it's rubber tracks that we're working, whether it's 600 volt technology, whether it's, I could go on and on and on of technologies that the Army decides are important to work, and that they want their labs and they want the AAL and whoever, I don't care, man on the moon to work. If industry that proposes to the PM request for proposal, if they don't take it, it ends up in the valley. And I have personally gone to our two primes in Detroit, to General Dynamics and BAE, and begged them, here's a whole pile of technologies. I got it. You're in charge. It's free to you, but that doesn't mean you have to use it, because you may decide that I don't want the risk because I'm trying to win a contract. I got all of that stuff. But, so I'm working a lot of good technologies, but to me, my definition of success is it actually showing up in a vehicle, whether that's an RCV that the guys are delivering in a few months, or whether it's some optionally manned fighting vehicle that's going to come down the road here in a few years, or whether it's an upgrade to a Bradley or an upgrade to an AMP, I don't care. That's a definition of success, and that's what I need to be held accountable to, and that's what keeps me up at night. Over.
Jeff, just add, having been one of the PMs a while back, I think that for anything that's really substantial, people need to understand that it is really not the PM that is the sole decision maker on those things. It is the very top. Usually the Army has a process for that, and the Army allocates the resources to accomplish the priorities. So I would spread that decision making around.
As the former mill dep for ASALT, sir, I would never argue with you, certainly not in public. I acknowledge that statement. My experience getting to be the Chinook, the guy in Chinook, I was always arrogant and naive enough to believe that I could convince my leadership to do the right thing. So I think the PM does have significant authorities, but certainly concur, sir, that there's a whole pile of people that make decisions on that stuff every day. Roger all that, sir.
Well, thank you for jumping us right into questions. I think you have an audience anxious to hear from you. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the audience, and just make sure you get the mic first. So, Brian, will you be our runner? Of course.
Thank you, General Kaufman and Mr. Langout. That was good. A question about technology insertion. General, you kind of alluded to the big Army, a lot of vehicles, make up the vehicle, call it a 113. Doesn't matter. So we got a lot of 113s out there, but there's new technology that could be inserted tomorrow. It seems to me we as the Army try to do all 60,000 M113s rather than the ones with the first cav. Put that technology in that group, supportable, logistically. Is there a way, are we talking about technology insertion, a faster way?
Well, it's a couple things. So first, I talked about AMP-B and JLTV before. Those are probably the easiest, right? Because they're in production, and it's going to take us several years to field them. You can insert that, and the PM can do that. One thing is the Army's not fooling around, and they've, through a series of night cuts in night court, in identifying the 31 programs, like that technology, the money to insert that, it's got to be a conscious decision by senior leaders, because like we're all in on the 31 programs, and any divergence from that puts those programs at risk. And so I think that's the balance. But to answer your question directly, I absolutely think that the units that would likely fight first, if we can insert technology into, you know, in, let's say Europe, into the Strikers or with the 173rd, yeah, I think that's where we'll always start.
You guys would be itching.
Picking up on the previous discussion, Dr. Lang had about the Valley of Death, have you folks, in this bigger discussion about, you know, the capital factory and trying to bring innovation and all the things that inhibit moving significant technologies to systems, has there been any discussion about moving the goalpost from TRL6 to TRL7 in the S&T world, so that part of the risk picture for the PMs is changed?
So back to senior leader decisions. Yeah, so been a lot of good discussion, and of course, you know, I learned a long time ago, a guy told me 1,000 years ago, and turns out he was right, follow the money. So Dr. Jetty on the ASALT side of the equation controls all dollars 6.4 and above. And so what does the law and regulation say about when you have what color money you're allowed to spend to get past TRL 6? That'd be $6.4. Who's in charge of 6.3 and below? That would be now our boss, General Murray. Okay. So yeah, there was great discussion about, well, why don't you take some of those $6.4 and put them under the same amount of, put them under the same guide, in this case, General Murray, so you can take those technologies to 7 or above. And I think that's a great question and a great idea, but that's not the world that we live in. Over. You know, the thing about being of retirement age, I feel so empowered now. But that's right. But he's got many more stars to go, and I don't want him to be associated with someone like me. So it's a great question, and I could not agree with you more. And there's some things in place to try to help with that. In all seriousness, there's some things to help with that. But, you know, right now the engine is very important to me. It's something that my organization worked on for many years. I really don't care about the drama of the past. I care about where we are today. And you know what? That freaking engine is at TRL 6, along with the transmission, 32-speed digital transmission, along with the integrated starter generator, tick, 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 tick. Oh, by the way, it's run in a Bradley, and you can do it in the field. Those are all factual statements. Now the Army has to decide, do we want to spend another $150 million to go from TRL 6 to a production-ready engine that will go into a fill-in-the-blank? That's the decision that the Army is facing right now. All I want is for the Army to make that decision based on factual statements, not hearsay. And so, you know, it's a hot button for me. But I have nothing in the decision-making process other than to say, we did what you asked us to do, Army, and we got it to this point, and here's the plan to take it the rest of the way. Now, other people with other priorities have to decide what to do next. And I'm good with whatever the answer is, as long as we make decisions based on facts, not fiction. Over. Nice knowing you, Ross.
Yeah, so there's a proliferation of go-fast initiatives, right? The OTAs are one of them. And as a small business, it participates in 13 consortia. NAMC is our favorite. You owe me later. Anyway, what we're observing is if everyone gets in the express lane at the supermarket, it ceases to be the express lane because there's 100 people in the express lane. And the long pole appears to be in the contracting manpower. So are there any thoughts to try to fix that? Because it's the same contracting people that are trying to do the go fast stuff and the regular stuff. And if I'm a contracting specialist and I've got a $100 million contract I get out of the door, or I've got a $2 million contract, I know which one I'm going to work on first, probably. So, is there any thought to boosting the contracting workforce to be able to go fast? Because that seems to be the limiting factor right now, from our perspective.
Yeah, so, I told my workforce the first day I came to work, the first thing you must do is you must go love your contracting officer. Because their job, they're that important to the equation. And there's no question that we're short contracting officers, in my opinion, across the Army. And they will tell you it takes at least 5 to 7 years to train someone to be able to do that job well, because that side of the business is so complicated. So I would just say I totally agree. It's a discussion that we have in the Team Detroit Arsenal community with the park up there. He understands. I would just say that I agree with you, but fortunately, at least on our OTA activities, they're certainly, no one can argue they're not moving along slower than the FAR-based stuff, and so there is progress. It is not where we want to be, and if Dan Gallagher were sitting right here, he would say, I concur with you, Jeff. We are working to try to get you better, and he's got a number of things that he's doing internal to his formation to make it to where NAMC and others are more efficient. So hear you loud and clear, but I don't want this to come across as anything other than I do love my contracting officer. And those are very difficult jobs. And I'm not saying that to, I don't know, maybe I am, but it's really I concur. Leave it at that.
And also, it's not just about speed, it's about authorities, right? And the authorities that the OTAs provide the government, and it is huge. It's just another tool in the kit bag. I mean, the FAR is the FAR. So even if it took you, I don't know, make up a number, 6 months longer, but you had different authorities that allow innovation on your side and the government more choices, I think I might be willing to spend that extra 6 months to get those, depending on those.
And I'll just foot stomp that for you both a little bit, working with your contracting folks. They're trying very hard, and they're trying to learn as much as they can very quickly to be able to meet your needs. But I agree with you. We don't say anymore that the OTA is fast, number one, because we know it's slowed down, but number two, because the real beauty of the OTA lies in the collaboration, lies in being able to have government and industry at the table from the very beginning and share that technical information so that you have the solution that you need to get to the warfighter. And it's getting it to the warfighter as quickly as possible, not necessarily getting it under contract as quickly as possible. And so know that we're working with the team over at ACC Warren as well to share best practices that we've learned since we've been doing this since 2008 and supporting them in any way that we can, that staying in our swim lanes makes sense for us to be able to help alleviate their workload.
What is the Army's thought process on optionally manned versus unmanned when it comes to vehicle robotics? One would think that optionally manned would be a bridge to the future of fully unmanned, but it seems that the RCV program in particular was looking only at unmanned, where there's a great risk on the autonomy side, as the prior panel talked about.
Yeah, so there's two things. The RCV is obviously totally unmanned. And one of the things we're trying to determine in that is expendable, attritable, manned, right? So what, if it is unmanned, are some of those attritable, are others expendable, and trying to work through that. So that's one of many things that we're in our campaign of learning. As far as the option manned fighting vehicle and why those options were written in, is because it provides commanders on the ground the ability to take any of their infantry fighting vehicles and put it into dangerous situations, engage the enemy, identify the enemy without endangering the crew or the infantrymen in the back. So it's really about providing options. And the other, what I've learned in the last 18 months or almost 2 years, is the autonomy is hard, but the ability for it to be optionally manned is not. I mean, your car, if it's, you know, unless you're driving a 65 Mustang, and even then, we're turning doggone 113s into robots. I mean, they're the Jeff's age. And but having the hooks in there to have it drive by wire, it's not that big of a leap. And it's really not that expensive either. We get some great companies that have done work for us pretty cheap. And then, so then it comes down to, okay, optionally manned, do you want it, you know, is that a robot car? How much autonomy do you want on it? Do you want it to avoid obstacles? Do you want it to be able to navigate from waypoint to waypoint? Do you want it to pick the best route between those waypoints? The answer is yes. We want all of that. But what we really want is for that vehicle to have the same capability as a 7-year non-commissioned officer that can maneuver a tank across the ground like water flowing. It's a thing of beauty, and I'm sure many of you have seen it. But that tank commander or that Bradley commander that knows how to use terrain and get into a position where they can see the enemy, but they're not cresting themselves over the hill, exposing their underbelly. Those learned behaviors on the autonomy side, we're not there yet. And nobody is. So the Russians aren't there. The Chinese aren't there. That's really, really hard stuff. And then, I'm sorry, my last piece is we're back to physics. So how far from the controller or the human in charge of the robot, how far can you make that distance? And we've got some really innovative companies working on multi-band radios. We're looking at Wi-Fi options. So, but trying to push that to the point of tactical relevance. And I say, okay, I know I could do it at 700 meters. And everyone, their jaws hit the ground. 700 meters, that's tactically unacceptable. I'm like, well, I've been to combat a lot in armored vehicles, and I've never been 700 meters from my wingman, right? And if you go out to the first platoon maneuver of a new platoon, they're about 25 meters, right? So we just want to get it into, again, as good or better than a human. So.
Hello, Greg Wilds from DornerWorks, and a question follow-up to the lasso reference earlier from Mr. Langout. So we're, as an innovative small business, active with SIBRs, with your former AVMC, DARPA, NASA, et cetera, and then our favorite OTA, amongst others, such as NAMC. How would you coach us, the community here in the OTA world, to help facilitate that lasso, the pull, as opposed to the push? Are there things that we could do to help support that pull for technologies that come out of SIBR or OTAs for that adoption?
Yeah, so great question. So other than being able to see into the future and see which companies are going to bid, you know, look, in the end, there's a whole pile of us that work around the edges, but unfortunately, there's just a few that build the big stuff, right? If you look at my former life, aviation, right? There's 3 folks. Now there's others playing, and somebody might emerge, but you know, all the press is Lockheed, Sikorsky, Boeing, and Bell, right? And in our world, it kind of seems like, you know, I've been in it. And I've been 2 years now, and so that means I barely know enough to be dangerous, but it kind of seems like there's about 2 people that just kind of keep showing up over and over again. And so, you know, it's to me, it's convincing them that is their, you know, that, and only they can make the decision of where that's best for them, right? They're going into a competitive effort, whatever it takes to give them the edge. I do tend to believe that they're more inclined maybe to partner with a subcontractor that might have worked that technology before, and so maybe that's the answer. But you know, so to me, short of being able to see the future and short of being able to see who are the folks that are likely able to bid on a program of record product, because in the end, it's all, the ultimate game is the program of record, whether it's an ECP to a program of record or whether it's a whole new start, and figuring out who is the people that are going to do that. And I suspect that all of the business folks are always kind of looking to see how they might partner with folks in the future and playing that game. So it's building those relationships at the industry level would be my advice to that. Over. That's a hard question.
Well, and that's something that NAMC is really trying to do, as we talked about earlier, is give you guys opportunities to learn about each other and team with each other, and be able to present that full solution to the government when it comes down the pipeline. So we are working that solution. Any other questions for Mr. Langout or General Kaufman?
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate it. Okay, well, that wraps up our program. I know some of you have other things to get to with tactical wheeled vehicles, so enjoy. But go ahead and stick around, have another beer if you want. We're available to answer questions, and thank you for coming out.